change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
All right. Well,
morning.
We're back. Good morning. Why is it that we end up picking the butt crack of dawn to record these podcasts?
I don't know.
I think if people saw our calendars, they would know why. I mean, ultimately, from the time that's not the butt crack of dawn, you and I are in back-to-back meetings all day, and then on this like conference road, we've got dinners, and then all kinds of happy hours and things like that. So it's been a long couple days.
Yeah. When we're recording from home, like we've had enough caffeine. Our thoughts are a little bit more like comprehensive, logical. These ones on site are just maybe a little bit chaos.
Wait, you know what I think we should do is just analyze the transcripts in GPT. Don't tell GPT which sessions were recorded at home and then ask it to
which ones made more sense.
Yeah, which ones had more slurring words and made less sense. So we're excited to be here on another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz. We are here in Boston. Too bad you can't see the view. It's beautiful out, nice sunny day. And
nice.
Yeah, we just flew in yesterday from Toronto at the AFP ICON, where we recorded a session with Mallory Erickson. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
And we had a fundraising AI meeting.
Yeah.
About 65 people, which we'll talk about more also later.
Yeah. That was awesome. Got into Boston last night. Ended up meeting up with friends, and now we're at the AAMC conference. So for those that don't know, the AAMC is essentially the academic medical centers of the world. So universities that have healthcare systems. It's a world, obviously, I go way back in. We actually met working when I was working at a AAMC, and it's an area that has lots of data, and the data changes fluidly because patients come in so quickly. And so it was really my introduction to machine learning, because it was just like massive amounts of data. The data changes. We needed to make predictions very quickly. And it's pretty awesome. So you and I now work with, I don't even know how many, about 50% of our clients are probably AAMC clients.
Yeah. Some that we're working on both sides, where we have the academic and we have the medical side. So we're just bifurcated one or the other. But probably 50%.
Yeah, treasure trove of data. I think that's where data scientists we kind of like fly like gnats to like where there's like data over there, and like let's just go over there and there's more of it. So so this is our general FAI podcast, because knowing that when we do our interviews, which we love, that we don't get to talk about all the nerdy things that are happening every day. So this will be just our quick weekly update on advancement. But why don't we start a little bit, because we talked about ICON with Mallory. ICON is the international conference for fundraisers that AFP does every year. This year it was in Toronto, 3,000 people. It was a really great time. I think for me, the highlight though was, this is our third annual time we've done this at ICON, is that we host a meeting. And I don't think on purpose, but the meeting ended up at 7 a.m. on the last day of the conference.
At the butt crack of dawn.
Before
it was just FAI across the board, podcast meetings.
Maybe
early morning.
It really proved, I mean, even in the past years, like the people who show up, and not only this, you have to recognize that people like were staying in hotels that were separate from the conference center.
Yeah.
So they had to get up extra early to walk 15 minutes to the conference center and meet up. And I mean, sure enough, third year in a row, about 60 people showed up. And not that this is a hazing and we're trying to like weed out the people who really give a crap versus those that don't, but it really truly does in a way, because like if you're kind of on the fence about fundraising AI, or you're on the fence about what we're doing, you're not going to show up.
Yeah.
But the people who are showing up that early and leaning in and having conversation was awesome. So I don't know this is your first ICON FAI meeting, I think, right?
This is my first ICON.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of cool, just kind of taking a step back outside of FAI, because there's a lot of people I follow on LinkedIn, and I was like fangirling all over the conference. Like,
you have people fangirling over you.
I know you. Yeah.
I mean, you have like internet stalkers.
Probably. I'm hoping they're not stalkers. I'm going to have to.
I mean, no one said a stalker has to be bad.
So it was a very cool session. I mean, our conference, it more casual than some of the other ones, probably a little bit more casual than AAMC today, but I had a lot of fun. The FAI meeting, so and probably 65% there. There was a guy that we've been talking to that's been using the framework. He's from a nonprofit. He's been using it for his own use for his AI governance policy. So
yeah, shout out to Dan Kershaw if you're listening.
Yeah,
we know he is probably. He's awesome. It was so great to meet him in person and see how, he's doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Great use case of a small nonprofit that just got super creative and nimble.
Very small. And just using these resources that are, again, $20 a month to kind of have the manpower of maybe a team of 20 or so.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Great use case there. Good conversation. We kind of officially launched the branding for the 2024 summit. We talked about what can we do from last year's summit to this year's summit to make it more for nonprofits, right? Knowing that this is a resource for them. How can we kind of lay that out there so that they know, all right, this session maybe is kind of meeting you where you're at. This session might be a little bit more advanced for you. So a lot of good things coming for the second summit this year.
Yeah. One of the things for me, it's hard with a volunteer group. So fundraising AI, those that don't know, is very much a grassroots effort. And so this is just a lot of concerned citizens, now 6,000 people in 38 countries, which is about to expand much more globally with our partnership with the Resource Alliance. We can't do everything by committee. There has to be someone who's making decisions. So over the last week, Mallory and I, we ended up raising enough money. We hired Community Boost that's facilitating the conference, which is amazing. They really quickly put together a couple different themes and we're brainstorming and landed on the theme, which is generate good. Essentially, that's the tag and the theme for this year, which we didn't share with anyone. We essentially put it up on the screen and I was pleasantly surprised. Not that I was nervous, but always a little bit nerve-wracking when you do something like that behind a lot of people's back. You're kind of like, look, we can't, if we had consensus, we would never get it done. I don't know. What were your initial reactions? I don't think you had seen. I think maybe I told you about it.
You told me, but I
hadn't seen it show up on screen yet.
Right. I thought it was really cool. And I thought connecting, obviously a double entendre there would generate good, right? Generative AI, which is obviously the hot topic. But I really loved how Mallory, she might have said this in our session, but she definitely said it at the AI meeting. Like the big things coming out of the first summit the questions were, should we, how should we, and when should we?
Yeah.
So really driving everything to those three conversations. Should we for those people that are on the fence? How should we for those that are maybe a little bit past and decided should? And then when should we for those that are just kind of still testing out, but really moving to deployment? So I really like the focus of this year, just branding and just kind of where those sessions are going to be honed in on.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting.
I have to tell you, when I first saw Candace from Community Boost and Mallory were on a call a week ago, and she's like, I've got this really cool theme and I want to share it with you. And it's always hard because you're like in the moment, you're like processing, your brain is processing. She showed generate good. And my first instinct was like, like so much hype. And because you know why, right? So much emphasis and so much hype on generative that you and I have been working in predictive for so long, which is essentially the backbone of AI and essentially will continue to be. There's no risk of that. It's just not nearly as sexy. And so see the generate good. And I was like, oh, it hurt a little bit in my heart. And during the call, and Candace is explaining of like, this is why. And I, in a moment, because I was going to dig in and be like, you know what? No, it's about transformation. Like this year is about transformation or adoption kind of thing. And I reflected on the Gen AI conference that I just came from and how cool that conference was because it brought the average, like just the regular person. It brought the Dan Kershaws of the world to like look at all the cool stuff and like, let's learn from each other because there's no recipe for it. Like we're just creating. And that conference was different than any other conference I'd been to. So I was like, you know what? I talked myself off the ledge and I admittedly told them that like, let's go with it. And I think honestly, this conference, this summit this year will be so much more accessible because of it, because it won't feel like that barrier of a data science-y conference. We're going to talk about predictive machines and things like that. We're going to talk about the average fundraiser and what they can and what they should and shouldn't do with it. Obviously the overlay is that it's about responsible and strategic use of AI. So we don't do harm to our community, which I got yelled at by a bunch of Boy Scouts for attributing that phrase to Boy Scouts. I'll never do that again.
Be prepared. We found
be prepared. It's like, I said in the fundraising AI meeting for those listening, I said, it's this whole thing of like, let's use AI and do no harm, like the Boy Scout motto. And there happened to be a couple Eagle Scouts. And man, I thought Boy Scouts were supposed to be nice. They were like on me. I
think I saw somebody throw a chair. It was like almost a riot.
It was crazy. I was like, whoa, geez, like tone it down. Okay. Yeah. So Hippocratic Oath, doctors, get it. do no harm. That's really kind of the philosophy, and be good citizens. So I don't know what any other like things from Icon either. So you and I did a session on precision philanthropy, which is like the intersection of predictive and generative together. Any feedback that highlights from that really stuck out for you?
Yeah, so a couple things. So we asked a lot of questions in there. We probably had like 80, 100 people show up to that, right?
Yeah.
So pretty packed room. We were asking questions about how many of you are using it personally, how many are using it professionally. And we're seeing increased numbers every time we ask this question, right?
For sure.
But then the question of, do you have an AI governance policy? What do you think? 10?
No, it was like 4.
4.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah. It was like 4.
I tend to exaggerate. So 4 people raising their hands. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the session, we had like a line of people coming up to ask questions. And one guy was working with a number of small nonprofits.
Yeah.
And he asked specifically about AI governance policies that people are coming to him saying, again, should we, how should we, when should we? The same questions, but all about that how do we do this appropriately? How do we line up the structure so that we know we're going in the right path?
Yeah.
Right. And so that analysis paralysis kicks in even there, right? We know we need to have a framework. And so that's, I think, a beautiful part of what FAI does, because we built this framework and it can be a resource for nonprofits. But in my conversations with him after the fact, it was kind of they already have policies for all these other things like internet usage, social media. And do they have to have AI policies at each one of those levels? Do they have a broader AI policy?
Yeah.
Where do you even start?
I think that was an interesting question. So at the end of our session, we had, plenty of Q&A time. And the question was a very straightforward of like, look, it actually was, we don't have policies for all the other things. So why do we need an AI governance policy? And I think my response is like, well, there's no technology that's like AI. First of all, the risk of bias within whether large language models or predictive AI is significant. And that inequity will increase dramatically if we allow bias, make predictions based on bias. But I thought your answer was probably better for the average person, because I think you explained like when you sign up as an employee, you are signing a document that says you're not going to like download porn while you're at your desk.
Right. There is a whole HR handbook. It's just you read it, probably that you sign, and then you forget about it.
Yeah.
Right. So there are all these policies that have already been created, but the technology doesn't advance so fast that usually when they're created, they're fine in perpetuity, right? So I think in my conversation with him, recommendation was to take the framework, use that as a conversation starter, right? You want to have something in place. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect because as soon as you set it up, technology is going to change and you're going to have to think about all these new things that you didn't think about. But like, get that conversation, start asking the questions, start putting something in place so you have those guidelines and those guardrails. And then start looking at each of those policies, like internet usage, right? Can we or can we not have these personal OpenAI accounts, or should we have a team account, right? Like, are you using Copilot in Excel? Like, so just start somewhere, right? Starting somewhere is better than, what's that saying? Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Good.
I don't know.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, it's still early.
Yeah.
So two other observations for me. First is that, and this just felt good because by show of hands, how many knew about fundraising AI as a movement? Cool. I mean, it was at least half the room, probably 60, 70%. And then all of them by the end ended up raising their hand that they knew about it. That was pretty awesome. Obviously super biased sample because people may have come because they already knew us or had heard the podcast or something, which ended up number 3 in Canada for the last week or so. So
I think we're 5 in the US right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. So really, I think we are hearing a lot of feedback. So that was like feedback number 1 is like, actually the podcast is like, people are resonating with it and they're kind of enjoying it and learning something hopefully from that. And then my other takeaway, and that was just self-grandizing kind of comment. So if you're listening, thank you. And tell your friends. And the other was, when we were at the fundraising AI meeting, because it wasn't too many people, it was like 60 people, we were able to go around the room, and the community is so important. So everybody say their name and where they're from and say one word that they're hearing or feeling about the general sense or notion of AI in their sphere. And I don't know, I was surprised by the overlap, and I wish we had actually, I think Mallory might have captured it, but I'd love to take and distill every word and kind of get that general theme from GPT. But What was your take on that? Were you
Yeah.
surprised? And you describe kind of what the overall tenor was, and then like whether or not you were surprised by it.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody had to describe how they hear, because there was a lot of tech vendors, a lot of consultants, right? So they work with a large number of nonprofits, right? What's the word that you hear your clients referring to when talking about AI? And most of it was anxiety, confusion, concern, right? So
Yeah.
overwhelming majority probably fell into those three buckets.
Yeah.
Right?
Like probably 60-70%, right?
Yeah,
It
was
was
one of
around
those three.
something around whether or not I should do it because it's either scary or I don't know if it's good.
Right. And so it's kind of good and bad, right? It's good because that's the whole purpose for FAI, like that we are still hoping to be a resource for people having these questions, right? These questions are no longer resolved. It's not like everybody's jumped into AI and they know how to use it, so there's no longer a need, right? But the goal is to ultimately answer all those questions, address that anxiety, make it so it's approachable, it's easy, it's applicable. Like you have real world scenarios and steps on how to, all right, you're at 0, take this to get to step 2.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that helps align what this summit's going to be all about. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
It might even help us align with this podcast, like making sure that we're able to not our client or people don't have to wait till October to kind of get a sense of what is the next step. But here in our sessions, we can do more of those. We did an episode on major gift officer use of generative AI. So getting back into prospect research, grant writing, and all those kinds of things. So give them those baby steps.
Yeah, no, to your point, I mean, I think the message is heard, right? And super helpful because we admittedly last year with the Global Summit, we curated 36 speakers, 54 hours of content that were just kind of all over the map. Right. And this year, to your point earlier, is just like we're going to address we have actually specific stages. And in fact, we talked about having a self-assessment tool for the summit this year. That someone can go in, any person who's listening, go in and be like, okay, here's where I'm at. Answer these 5 questions. It will recommend to you which track you should be in, 1, 2, or 3. And so I think very heard, you and I get super nerdy on this stuff and probably use acronyms that we forget to distill it down. We do encourage listeners to reach out to us if you have a question about something, definitely let us know. But at the same time, we need to build our programming to meet the need. So 70% of people are saying like, I'm struggling with the basics. So let's bring it down. All right. So anything else from ICON, or want to move into the other happenings of AI this week?
The other last thing is just from, there were 14 sessions on AI.
Oh yeah. Right, you counted through about 14.
10%.
That's huge.
It's huge.
I mean, 3 years ago there were 1 and it was mine. I think. So like last year there were probably 4 or 5. So it was not long ago that it was just a weird oddball kind of thing to have. And now 14. And many of them I heard drew like really big crowds. So George Irish, Josh Hirsch, apparently had people chanting at some point in some learning thing. And I mean,
we should get more chants in our sessions.
We don't do chant. I don't know if that's in my DNA, but go Josh. 14. Yeah. So
that's impressive. I'm excited to see what next year's.
I think what it's saying is that the world has fundamentally shifted, that people have to look at how like the internet changed people's jobs, like how to use that technology. And maybe in the future, there won't be a need for 14 because AI will just be ubiquitous with everything that we do and get over this kind of fear thing.
And then how can we make our FAI website more living, breathing, like infuse AI into it, right? So that it's not just a repository of information, but it can be kind of go back and forth, AI chatbots, whatever it is, to kind of really distill AI use cases through that, as opposed to just having, obviously a lot of great information on there already, but how can we just continue to evolve that as a go-to place? Okay,
let's transition into just a couple other AI updates. But one of the things I always like to, what is your favorite use case of AI this week? If something stuck out, and I haven't put you on the spot. I was just thinking through this because it stuck in my head just a second ago.
When you put me on the spot.
I know, right? And you don't have to have this out because you have like a million and then they get jumbled in your head because you're always coming to me and saying like, have you seen this thing? Actually, for me, I'm going to change mine because I was thinking there was a video that I think Ethan Mollick put of a video game. So he saw a video game online and he took a video of it and he put it into, I forget which GPT or whatever. And he's like, explain this game to me and how to play it and how to win, basically. And just from a short clip on a video, AI through vision computing, understood all of it. And I mean, it's insane. I really struggle with reading rules of games. Like I hate it. It's like something that's just like hieroglyphics to me. And so usually I have my son interpret how to play a game. Then I'm fine playing it. But that was a really cool use case. I'm going to change my use case because now I'm actually taking two. Dan Kershaw at Furniture Bank. You saw, right? Yep. You know where I'm going with this.
Yep,
he showed us his business card, and on the backside of the business card, he and I actually had this little coffee session. We're talking about image porn, and image porn. A lot of nonprofits have been accused of essentially creating image porn using DALL-E or Midjourney or Stable Diffusion and saying like, oh, look at these poor children, give us money. Dan's brilliant approach, I thought really, really smart, is that it says on there, he said, this image isn't real, but the reality is.
Yeah.
And man, it had like this like kind of visceral reaction for me. I'm like, what an incredible use of like calling out, like using the technology,
right,
calling it out, and then drawing attention to the reality of literally children sleeping on the ground.
Right.
And so hats off to Furniture Bank and Dan for really, I think, finding a creative and also transparent way of using AI that doesn't diminish trust. So
right, because we've seen those articles of like, is it ethical to have Midjourney create images of poverty for you to sell your mission, right? Not sell your mission, but convey your mission. And so I think the fact that he just kind of, like you said, calls it out and is like, all right, let's move past the fact that this is AI generated, but talk more about why this is AI generated, like what's really going on behind the scenes. And if we were to go back and look at our podcast and like the names that we mentioned, Ethan Mollick is probably top of the list, right? Followed by Connor Grannon, Ali Miller. I think Dan Kershaw is probably
he's going to be, he'll be a regular guest on here.
Well
I
done,
just
Dan.
love the scrappiness. And a lot of times I started in nonprofit in 2000 after launching a .com and selling that .com. And so I was already like oriented toward technology and how that could be used in nonprofit. Many weren't. I built the Boys and Girls Club's first website, like through HTML. And so I see so many of those similarities of jumpstarting to now, which is like Dan, like just beating the crap out of GPT to like solve for things and honestly let your organization level up, not just like one level, but like leapfrog several levels to operate in a pace and in a place that wouldn't be possible otherwise. So super cool. And I think we'll have lots of people who will learn from those kind of use cases.
Yeah. So great guide, awesome stuff. So just, if you don't know him, get to know him.
Yeah.
Real quick, my use case, I thought about it while you went through two use cases.
I know.
Also Ethan Mollick, but he was talking about Devin, which we've talked about in past. I think our conversation with Tim Paris that came up first. But Devin is like the first example of agentive AI, right? So instead of just doing a task, like you could assign it to do a job, right? So he had it he gave it a data set and an Excel file. He said, write a academic research paper with doing full analytics on this data set, creating the visualizations, like that could be published within a journal. And in 30 minutes, it had that paper. Like
an academic research paper, not like a blog or a LinkedIn post, right?
That is incredible. And it's now, right? It's not for public use, but it is available now. By the end of the year, we're going to be a completely different ball.
So then let's just stay on this because there's only a couple other updates that I think were really just kind of nerdy and interesting. I was on an airplane Monday flying to Toronto, and I posted on LinkedIn from 30,000 feet that I downloaded a 72-page report on generosity and had GPT quickly analyze it while in the air, provide me highlights, provide me unanswered questions that the study doesn't address and that maybe warrant like further conversation, further research. And so I just wanted to get that essence. And it felt like the future.
Yeah.
But I also realized like I'll never read a 72-page report front to back ever again. Like, why would I? And so an academic research paper. So here's where it really comes into question. So like Devin, this autonomous AI, creates an academic research paper that's probably 100 pages or something, fully cited and everything else. Who's reading it? Because at the end of the day, Devin's reading it
for someone else.
Because anyone now would basically say, once you've done this a few times, I promise you, like for people who are not listening, either you're not reading the report in general just because it's too big, or you're loading a PDF into ChatGPT or Claude or Bard or whatever, Gemini, and you're getting the bullets, like you're getting the distillation of it, the essence of it. And maybe if it had something that is like really interesting for you, that you're going to go back and kind of find those sections,
Mhm.
but you can interrogate the report to say what are these citations or what sections do I need to drill into? So I just wonder, again, we've talked about this a lot, where like generative is super cool, but it also creates more.
Creates more.
Is more
Mhm.
better? And at what point does more just too much?
So I think just kind of staying on that, I think more content is not better, right? But more information is better, right? By having like,
I
if
mean, social media.
for is that info like
I mean, you spent 4
That's-
hours watching dog videos the other night. So
okay, more valuable information, right?
valuable. There's
so-
a qualifier. Valuable
yeah,
information.
Yeah, I should. We'll put that.
I mean, some people would say dog videos are valuable. Many people.
So for research, maybe
Right.
right? There's some for research, but if it would have taken researchers months to put that paper together, right? And now all that information is out in a matter of 35 minutes, right? Again, it goes back to what could people do post computers that they couldn't have done before
Yeah.
by offloading this work that like took them significant amounts of time, and now they can dig into deeper problems that have just kind of been on the back burner. Like, I think that's where the value comes.
Yeah.
We were also kind of talking about this at the airport over lunch. Like, you're not going to have stock images anymore. There's no need to use stock images. We saw when we were walking around Toronto, what would have been stock images are all mid-journey.
You can
like
tell.
advertisements
Yeah.
for a bar plastered on the side of a building, all coming from mid-journey,
Yeah.
right? Or Dolly or whatever. But it'll change what's valuable. So, I mean, questions came out about photography. Like, when photography came out, what does that do to painters?
Right.
It will change the value of a painting.
Right.
It's now not for necessity; it's for
It's a
art.
premium,
Right.
right? An actual painting is like a high premium.
Yeah.
Or a letterpress versus a laser printer. So
Handwritten letters now have significant value when
Right.
that was taken for granted because that's all that there was.
Yeah.
Right. So, not sure how that's going to apply to academic research papers. Maybe handwritten academic research papers will be more valuable,
yeah.
but there's going to be something. It's just going to shift in a way that we just can't really conceptualize right now.
Yeah, no, we've said this a lot, and I think we should say it continually, is that especially from a nonprofit orientation, and that's what this podcast is about, is that the premium on personalization will never be greater.
Yeah.
And that because of automation, because of just mass communication, the ability to scale even creative one-off things, that personalization will have a higher premium than ever. And so that's when organizations literally can lean into things like a phone call, an actual text message, a handwritten letter, at the very least, a note to say, thinking about you on the receipt for donation. I mean, these aren't things that we're unaware of. Like, we know that when we receive them, it feels good. And I think most people who receive a handwritten card now save it, where a long time ago, you probably didn't. Actually, a lot of people still have always saved handwritten letters. So
Yeah.
do
I have
more of those.
A couple of those that you say. So you say those examples, and I think phone call, that could be AI generated now, right? Text message could be by a robot, right?
Yeah.
And then handwritten. I mean, they have those as well, right?
Yeah.
So like I think it's face to face. You cannot fake face to face.
Yeah.
I know that you are not a robot right now. At least 99% confident. Right.
A lot of people disagree. Yeah. Well, and we talk about more. So getting into just a couple things in news, there was an article that came out that Google's upset because OpenAI scraped all of YouTube. And we knew that was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So we knew that.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think we talked about this, probably one of our first podcasts, that like LLMs have been trained on all written context ever created. So like every book, every article, everything that's been on the internet has been scraped. That the next iteration, the biggest limitation was, what about all voice content? What about all video content? Which is actually a much bigger body of content. I mean, just think about. And so sure enough, it's already been done. Like, it's not like we were thinking, like where I thought it was like, oh, this is going to be a year from now or 2 years from now where they've cracked the code on this. They've already done this. And so of course, Google's going to sue OpenAI, and these lawsuits just keep on going. It's like, hey, you scraped it because you violated our policies, and it's not intended for these things. Although I'm pretty sure Gemini is built on Google
To save
or from
fat.
YouTube data. So that was one. The other is just, I mean, a scale thing. There was an announcement that Microsoft and OpenAI that they're going to build a thing called Stargate supercomputer, which I think is just a super cool name, but $100 billion supercomputer. And so this is like so much to think about in this, because a friend who builds GPTs or GPUs for AI, shout out to Phil. And we think about the technology and the pace that this technology things get built. Like, you're going to spend $100 billion to build a computer. how do you even do that and not have that computer be obsolete by the time it's built?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is at a scale that's so far beyond what other supercomputers are. So I'm sure they're taking into account that flexibility and adaptability of it, because it's not their first rodeo, right? That they know that as every 6 months and every year goes by, this computer will take a couple of years to build, is that the technology will change. So I'm guessing they're building it in this modular way that you can't build it in a static thing of like, if technology is today what it is, that they're building it essentially for the future.
Yeah. But that also, I mean, what's going to come out from that? We read that Google had a supercomputer that came out within the last year, and it was 75 times faster than a human, 750 times faster.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to come out with the new supercomputers? Where just the information that's going to come from that? Hopefully not more dog videos, but like valuable information.
For sure, more dog videos. There's no doubt we're getting more dog videos.
I did, just jumping back to Google, there's an article came out that they're considering putting AI generated searches or AI assisted searches behind a paywall. Right. And it comes back to that quote of, if you are not paying for the product, you are the product.
I'll bet you it's $20 a month.
Remember when OpenAI was just free and they sent out that survey, like how much you would you be willing to pay?
Right.
You wish that you chose like $15 a month?
$4.
Right.
$4 a month.
$3.25 is my max.
Yeah. $20 a month is like literally the number that everyone goes with.
But I mean, we've talked about this many times. If you are not paying for it, $20 a month is not that much, right? Like, I mean, we probably spent half that on Starbucks today, but you get a lot more, not just like technical capability, but also safety and security, right? You have the options to turn off training. If you are not paying for it, it is being trained on your information.
And I think a lot of people, I mean, there's a threshold of like, how much are you willing not to pay for ads, right? And so like we see this with like Amazon Prime, or we see this with other things. Like, frankly, I mean, that's a big part of it. It's like, I don't want to be distracted. I want to turn off ads. Like, if you could do it on Instagram, how much would you pay?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's going to be really interesting. And really the future of internet search is going to be probably free for people who want to put up with ads and deal with that, and not free for others. So I worry about it.
Do you usually pay for stuff to get rid of ads?
Yeah.
Like YouTube TV?
Not YouTube, but because YouTube, I think, is like unduly expensive. Like, I actually think for whatever reason, they think that the value of their content is that much more valuable than it is. That's like the only thing I don't pay for. I pay for almost everything else.
Yeah. Hulu, the ads are getting worse.
Right.
Probably gonna start paying.
Well, I mean, they're all going to be created by AI. They probably already are. All right. So we're already out of time, but there's a couple little things. Let's leave on this one, because this has been on my list for a little while, to leave our listeners with this like really interesting use. The very last one about the Pulitzer Prize. So 45 of 45 finalists for this year's Pulitzer Prize have disclosed using AI in the process of researching, reporting, or telling their submissions, according to the Pulitzer Prize. It's the first time the awards, which received 1,200 submissions this year, required entrants to disclose AI usage. So 5 of the 45 finalists disclosed that they had used AI either in research and compiling and proofing, whatever. And I think that's a very healthy thing. Like, actually, I mean, it's, again, back to the academic research paper. It's not like, hey, it's either this or that. And that was Mallory's point. I think we talked on the podcast. Like, people think about AI in binary terms,
good or bad.
And it's not. It's like awesome that it's like, hey, you could use this, but you have to disclose it and what you used it for, And so, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing we could end on. We have so much more to talk about next week on this podcast, because there's just like, again, a treasure trove of things that are happening right now.
Where do you expect that number to be next year?
I don't know. Probably 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least 50%. I mean, ChatGPT came out 13 days after we wrote our book. There's 0% chance that we would have not used it writing The Generosity Crisis, because we would have used it at the very, very least. We would use it to proof, and we hired a proofer. We still have 2 typos in our book, which drives me freaking bonkers. I guarantee we would have had 0 typos. I mean, at the very least, that's what we would have done. So it'll be at least half, if not more.
Yeah. Wow.
So awesome. All right. Cool. Well, why don't you close us out, Scott? It's been great to spend time with you this morning, as the sun is up now and we're going to head off to conference land, and we'll see everyone next week. Anything else?
Now that I finished my coffee, my thoughts are probably more coherent. So maybe we just do another session. But thanks everybody for listening, for subscribing, for sharing. And yeah, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or Fundraising AI. Let us know what you like, what you want to hear, what we should focus on, and how we can help.
Yep. Like and subscribe. Thanks so much, everyone.
Well, Thanks.